Chapter 1. An Ordinary Day. At first glance, the Johnson family led an almost idyllic life. Their house stood on a quiet street lined with similar, single-family homes, surrounded by neatly trimmed lawns and small gardens. Every neighbor knew them by name, and the children played carefree on the sidewalks. Martha was a teacher at the local elementary school, where she taught fourth graders. She loved her job, although she sometimes complained about the bureaucracy and noise. Her students liked her. She was patient but demanding and always encouraged them to express themselves. Each morning, she woke up before everyone else. She donned her favorite apron adorned with tiny flowers and prepared breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice. On Sundays, she baked muffins for Sarah, and she cooked Freddie's favorite oatmeal with honey. Martha liked order. Her calendar was always full of notes: parent-teacher meetings, school assemblies, lesson plans. She was the one who remembered everything: friends' birthdays, car inspections, and the weekly laundry. Freddie owned a car repair shop on the outskirts of town. People said he had golden hands, and every car that entered his shop left in better shape than new. He was a typical pragmatist, naturally calm, slightly skeptical of anything that defied logic. Every morning he ate the breakfast Martha prepared, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "I'll be back before 6." He loved his work. However, he often brought it home, spending evenings on the couch with a mug of coffee, flipping through catalogs of car parts, or watching documentaries about the automotive industry. Martha sometimes joked that his heart beat to the rhythm of an engine. Sarah was an only child, which meant her parents devoted plenty of attention to her. She was a bright, quiet child, though she sometimes seemed lost in thought. She spent hours in her room, drawing on large sheets of paper. She loved colors. Her desk was packed with crayons and paints, and the walls of her room were adorned with her creations.
What did you draw today, sweetheart?
Martha often asked.
Everything I saw.
Sarah would reply with a smile, showing drawings full of flowers, animals, and tiny figures. In the evenings, Freddie told her bedtime stories while Martha lay beside her until the girl fell asleep. Chapter 2. A Family Weekend. It was Saturday, a day the family always spent together. Martha and Freddie had long agreed that Saturdays would be a no-technology day. No phones, no computers, no TV. Sarah loved these days because her parents were entirely hers. Martha was making pancakes in the kitchen while Freddie tried to fix a cabinet door that had been creaking for a week. Sarah sat at the table with crayons and a sheet of paper.
What are you drawing, sweetheart?
Martha asked, turning with a pen in her hand.
You, Dad, and me.
Sarah replied, glancing at a drawing of 3 smiling figures holding hands.
But I'll add something else.
What's that?
Freddie asked, adjusting a screw.
You'll see.
Sarah said mysteriously. After breakfast, the family went for a walk in the park. It was Sarah's favorite place, a large green space with a small playground and a pond where ducks swam.
Dad, look!
Sarah called, pointing at the sky. Freddie looked up and saw a flock of birds forming patterns in the sky.
That's called a formation.
He explained.
That's how birds fly south for the wind to hear.
Sarah gazed at him with admiration.
You know everything, Dad.
Martha laughed, hugging her husband.
Of course he does. He's the smartest man in the world, isn't he?
Freddie smiled, but he felt that something in Sarah's gaze was different, as if she saw more than just a bird formation. Chapter 3. The Beginning of Strange Drawings. In the evening, when Sarah returned from the yard, she brought a new drawing with her.
Look who I met today.
She said, holding up the sheet for her parents. Martha and Freddie looked at the drawing. It depicted a girl in a white dress. Her hair was very light, almost white, and her eyes were as blue as the sky.
Who is she?
Martha asked.
Veronica.
Sarah replied, as if it were obvious. Freddie looked at his daughter curiously.
Veronica? Your friend?
Yes, I met her in the park today. She said she likes to draw just like me.
Martha and Freddie exchanged glances. The park had been empty that day. They hadn't seen any other girl.
Maybe it's her imagination.
Martha said when Sarah went to her room.
Maybe.
Freddie replied, but something about the drawing unsettled him. Chapter 4. The Routine Begins to Crack. In the following days, Sarah brought more drawings featuring Veronica. In each one, the girl looked more detailed but also sad. Her eyes seemed to stare directly at Martha, even when she glanced briefly at the sheet. Martha began noticing that Sarah was spending more and more time alone in her room. She didn't want to go outside or play with her friends. Instead, she kept drawing.
Is everything okay, sweetheart?
Martha asked one evening, sitting on the edge of Sarah's bed. Sarah nodded.
Yes, Mom. Veronica says you're good people, and she wants me to talk to you.
About what?
Martha felt a cold chill.
That she's sad, that she doesn't want to be alone.
Martha paled.
Sweetheart, Veronica is just your imagination, right? It's just a game.
Sarah looked at her mother with a seriousness that didn't fit a child.
No, Mom. Veronica is real.
Chapter 5. First Signs of Worry. Days passed, and Veronica appeared in more and more of Sarah's drawings. At first, Martha tried to ignore it, thinking it was just her daughter's imagination. Freddie, pragmatic by nature, also dismissed it. One evening, Martha and Freddie sat in the living room, enjoying a moment of peace. Martha was reading a book on child psychology, and Freddie was watching a documentary about cars. From Sarah's bedroom came a faint sound, something between a laugh and a whisper.
Did you hear that?
Martha asked. Freddie looked at her.
Hear what?
It sounded like someone talking in Sarah's room. Maybe she's talking in her sleep. I'll go check.
When Martha entered Sarah's room, she saw her daughter sitting on the bed. Her eyes were open but seemed distant.
Sarah, sweetheart, what's going on?
Martha asked, sitting beside her.
She's here.
Sarah whispered.
Veronica is standing by the window.
Martha looked at the window. It was empty. A cold shiver ran down her spine.
Sarah, there's no one there.
The girl looked at her mother, her green eyes gleaming in the moonlight.
Can't you see her, Mom? She's sad.
Martha took a deep breath.
Go to sleep, sweetheart. We'll talk tomorrow.
She turned off the light, but she couldn't sleep all night. Chapter 6. Sleepwalking. A few days later, Martha woke up in the middle of the night. Freddie was sleeping soundly beside her, snoring softly, but something felt wrong in the house. She had a strange feeling that someone was walking down the hallway. She got up, opened the bedroom door, and peeked into Sarah's room. Her bed was empty. Panic-stricken, she searched the house and found Sarah in the living room. The girl was standing in front of the fireplace, her arms hanging by her sides, staring into the flames.
Sarah,
Martha grabbed her by the shoulders and gently shook her.
what are you doing here?
Sarah looked at her as if seeing her for the first time.
Veronica wanted fire.
What are you talking about?
Martha was bewildered.
Go back to bed.
Sarah returned to her room, but Martha felt deeply uneasy. She told Freddie about it the next morning, but he brushed it off.
It's sleepwalking. Kids do that sometimes.
He said, sipping his coffee.
I'll look online for advice.
Martha wasn't convinced. Chapter 7. Veronica still present. Sarah wouldn't stop drawing. Her sketches grew increasingly unsettling. One afternoon, as Martha sifted through her daughter's pile of drawings, something caught her eye that made her heart race. In one picture, Veronica was depicted entirely differently. She was lying underground, surrounded by darkness. Large red X's were drawn over her eyes. Nearby, there was a shovel, and in the background, dark trees eerily resembled the park near Sarah's school.
Sarah, what is this?
Martha asked, holding up the drawing. Sarah looked at it seriously.
Veronica said she's there, underground. Someone hid her there.
Martha tried to speak, but no words came out. Freddie, just back from work, glanced at the drawing too.
This isn't normal anymore.
He said.
We need to do something about this.
Chapter 8. A Visit to the Specialist. Freddie and Martha took Sarah to see a psychologist, Dr. Amanda Blake. Amanda had a warm voice and a calm demeanor as she listened attentively to everything they shared.
Sarah, is Veronica your friend?
She asked, sitting across from the girl.
Yes,
Sarah replied.
but not a normal one.
Why isn't she normal?
Amanda leaned forward slightly to make eye contact with the girl.
Because she's a ghost.
Sarah said, as though it were the most natural thing in the world.
She wants me to help her.
Martha clasped her hands on her lap tightly. Amanda gave her a reassuring look.
Children have vivid imaginations. This might be her way of coping with stress.
But what if
Martha trailed off, searching for the right words.
it's not just her imagination?
Amanda smiled gently.
Trust me, it's normal. Children often create imaginary friends, especially if they're only children. Let's revisit this in a week.
But with each session, Sarah seemed to retreat further into herself. She sleepwalked more frequently and began talking in her sleep, saying things that sent chills down her parents' spines.
She doesn't want to be there.
Or,
You have to find her mom.
Chapter 9, Paranormal Events. The Johnson home began to feel less like a safe haven. Lights flickered for no reason, and the TV turned on by itself. One day, Martha heard a faint tapping sound coming from the fridge. When she approached, she saw words written in condensation on the door. "Help me." At first, Freddie dismissed it as a prank by Sarah. But one night, he experienced something that froze the blood in his veins. Sitting in the garage, he heard a faint whisper behind him. He turned, but no one was there.
Sarah, is that you?
He called, but silence was his only answer. When he returned inside, Sarah was fast asleep, and Martha sat on the couch, staring at a new drawing. It showed Veronica again, but this time, the girl looked furious. Her mouth was wide open, as if screaming, and her hands reached out toward the viewer.
She wants us to find her.
Sarah whispered the next morning.
She said it's in the park.
Chapter 10, The Truth About the Park. The days grew darker, and the tension in the Johnson household became palpable. Freddie, usually pragmatic, began to notice oddities he could no longer ignore. Martha stopped pretending everything was fine, though she struggled to accept the possibility of something supernatural happening in their lives. One evening, Sarah sat down with her parents, clutching yet another drawing. This time, Veronica wasn't alone. Beside her was a dark figure, a shadowy silhouette with elongated arms and twisted fingers.
Who is that?
Martha asked, pointing at the ominous figure. Sarah stared at the drawing and whispered.
That's the one who hurt Veronica.
Freddie felt his heart pounding.
Who? What did they do?
He buried her underground.
Sarah said, looking directly at her father.
In the park. She wants us to find her.
Chapter 11, The Search Begins. The next day, despite their fears, Martha and Freddie decided to visit the park Sarah had described. Freddie tried to mask his skepticism, but Martha could tell he was growing more uneasy. The park, once a vibrant place, now seemed eerily different. The wind rustled through the dry leaves, and the trees leaned toward each other as if hiding a secret.
Where should we look?
Freddie asked, scanning the area. Sarah pointed toward a small overgrown path leading to an old playground.
There.
At the site, they found a neglected sandbox and a rusted carousel. Sarah approached the sandbox and placed her hand on the ground.
Here.
She said with certainty. Freddie glanced at Martha and then at their daughter.
Sarah, how do you know?
Veronica showed me.
Chapter 12, The Discovery. Freddie couldn't shake the image of the sandbox from his mind. The next evening, he decided to take action. Armed with a shovel, he returned to the park under the cover of darkness. Though Martha was initially against the idea, she eventually joined him. As they dug, the earth felt heavier, as though it resisted their efforts. Freddie's shovel struck something hard and he froze. He looked at Martha.
There's something here.
Carefully, they cleared away the dirt, revealing old, rotting wooden planks. They seemed to be part of a small coffin. Martha struggled to hold back tears, while Freddie felt a cold sweat run down his back. They pried open the wooden lid and found the remains of a young girl. Her tattered white dress was still visible, and her pale blonde hair seemed to glow in the moonlight.
It's
Martha couldn't finish the sentence.
really Veronica.
Chapter 13. Who was Veronica? Freddie and Martha reported their discovery to the police, and an investigation was launched immediately. A few days later, they learned that the remains belonged to Veronica Dawson, an 8-year-old girl who had disappeared 10 years ago. Her last known location had been near her school. The police had found no leads back then. Sarah seemed calm, as though relieved her parents finally believed her story. But her eerie behavior persisted. One day she told Martha.
Veronica says the man lives nearby, and she's afraid he'll do it again.
Martha turned pale.
What does that mean, sweetheart?
She wants you to find him.
Chapter 14. Hunting the Truth. Freddie and Martha delved into Veronica's case. With the help of the local library and the internet, they uncovered that a man named Gerald Parker had been a prime suspect at the time. A recluse living near the park, he had been let off due to lack of evidence. Determined, Martha decided to confront Gerald. She went to his house at the end of an abandoned street. An older man with a weary face opened the door.
"What do you want?"
He asked suspiciously.
Good afternoon. I'd like to know what happened to Veronica Dawson. Years ago, you were a suspect in the case of her disappearance.
Gerald slammed the door almost instantly, but not before Martha caught a flicker of fear in his eyes. Chapter 15. Revenge from Beyond the Grave. That night, the disturbances in the Johnson house escalated. Lights flickered, doors slammed, and Sarah began saying things far beyond her years.
He knows you found her.
She said one evening as her parents sat with her in the living room.
Veronica says he's scared.
Sarah, how do you know this?
Martha asked, her voice trembling. Sarah's answer was as chilling as her tone.
Because Veronica won't let him escape.
Later that night, Freddie awoke to a scream. In the living room, he saw something he would never forget. A shadowy figure of a girl in a white dress standing there, staring at him. Her eyes no longer held sadness, but pure rage. Chapter 16. The Spirit's Wrath. After the night Freddie saw the shadow of a little girl in the living room, the atmosphere in the Johnson house changed completely. Martha noticed that Sarah seemed increasingly calm, as if she had accepted Veronica's presence. However, Freddie was on the verge of a breakdown.
This is getting out of hand, Martha.
He said one evening, sitting at the kitchen table.
Things are happening in our house that can't be explained.
Martha simply nodded.
I know, but what can we do? Move out? Would that even help?
I don't know,
Freddie replied, rubbing his face with his hand.
but I know one thing. That Gerald, he's hiding something. We need to act.
Sarah walked into the kitchen as if she had overheard the conversation. She looked at her parents with a serious gaze.
Veronica says you have to force him to tell the truth.
Freddie looked at his daughter.
And what if it doesn't work? What if you're wrong? I mean, he wasn't arrested, and there's no proof it was him.
Sarah just shrugged.
She's not wrong.
Chapter 17. The Confrontation. Freddie decided they could wait no longer. The next day, he and Martha visited Gerald Parker's house again. This time, they were prepared. Freddie brought a flashlight and his phone, ready to record the conversation if Gerald confessed to anything. The door was opened by the same man, but this time he looked more anxious.
"What do you want now?"
He asked, though his voice trembled. Freddie stepped forward.
We know you know something about Veronica Dawson. We found her body. It's time to tell the truth. Were you involved or not?
Gerald stepped back as if Freddie's words were a physical blow.
I don't know what you're talking about. It was a long time ago."
Martha looked at him with determination.
Maybe so, but Veronica hasn't left. She can't rest. She's here. And she won't stop until you confess what you did.
Gerald stared at them with wide eyes.
She's here? You must be crazy."
Freddie felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up.
You've seen her, haven't you?
Gerald lowered his gaze, his hands starting to tremble.
"I never wanted it to go this far. I tried. I just wanted to scare her. But she started running. And then
Martha held her breath.
What did you do?
it was an accident.
Gerald whispered, hiding his face in his hands.
She hit her head on a rock. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I hid her body in the park."
Freddie felt a surge of anger, but before he could say anything, a sound came from Gerald's kitchen, like something heavy falling to the floor. Gerald looked behind him, terrified.
She's here.
He whispered.
Veronica.
Chapter 18. Veronica's wrath. Gerald tried to close the door, but suddenly it slammed open with a bang, as if an invisible force had pushed it. Strange things began happening inside the house. Lights flickered and smears appeared on the walls, resembling children's handprints. Gerald stumbled back, tripping over a rug.
I'm sorry.
He screamed, looking at the empty space.
I didn't mean to kill her.
Martha grabbed Freddie's hand.
Freddie, we have to do something. This will end badly. We need to report this. We have recorded evidence.
Freddie stepped inside, trying to reason with Gerald.
Tell us everything, Gerald. It's the only way to end this.
Gerald looked at them, then at the empty space in front of him.
Veronica, please, please forgive me. Stop haunting me.
At that moment, all the lights in the house went out, and a high, chilling laugh broke the silence, seeming to come from all directions. Martha felt a cold breeze envelop her, and Freddie held her tighter, trying to mask his own fear. In the corner of the room, a misty figure appeared, a blonde-haired girl in a white dress. Her blue eyes glowed unnaturally, and her face was full of anger. She raised her hand and pointed at Gerald.
Tell them everything. You killed me.
A soft but menacing voice echoed.
Tell them what you did before I take you away.
Chapter 19. The Confession. Gerald fell to his knees, shaking like a leaf.
I was so foolish, so stupid. I tried to scare her because she saw me stealing money from the park's booth. If she told anyone, I'd go to jail, or have to pay a fine I couldn't afford. I tried to stop her, but she hit her head on a rock. She was dead, and I didn't know what to do.
Martha looked at Veronica's figure. Her expression didn't change, but something in the air softened.
She won't forgive you, Gerald,
Martha said quietly.
but we'll make sure the truth comes out.
Suddenly, Veronica's misty form began to recede, her silhouette blurring. A look of sadness crossed her face as she turned to Sarah, who was now standing in the doorway.
Thank you. Now my family can find peace. I've been found. My mom won't have to wait for me to come home anymore. And the punishment he'll face in prison, it'll be worse than hell.
She whispered the words and then disappeared into a bright light. Chapter 20. Justice. The police arrested Gerald after Freddie and Martha reported his confession. Veronica's remains were laid to rest, and her case finally found justice. The paranormal occurrences at the Johnson house ceased, and Sarah regained her peace. However, she still remembered Veronica. Sometimes, while looking at her drawings, she felt Veronica's presence. She wasn't afraid anymore. She knew Veronica had found solace. Martha and Freddie talked for a long time about what had happened.
Do you think she's really gone?
Freddie asked one evening. Martha looked out the window at the calm backyard.
I hope so. But if not, at least she knows we heard her out. She deserved a proper burial. Her parents must feel relief now that it's resolved, though the pain surely remains in their hearts.
And though life returned to normal, they never saw the world around them in the same way again.